Holy cow, guys. Portland just hit rock bottom. Now imagine this. Activists are so desperate. They're so out of touch. They launch an emergency naked bike ride to protest President Donald J. Trump sending in the National Guard. Yeah, that's right, guys. Their grand strategy. Not jobs, not families, not safety, just stripping down the streets while chaos burns around them. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. Trump's guard didn't flinch. So while the activists turned Portland into a circus, the military moved in, boots on the ground, helicopters overhead, and ice cracking down harder than ever. Suddenly, the protesters, screaming "Power to the people," found out what happens when you play stupid games. You get real consequences. Guys, we're talking about ICE protesters arrested, Border Patrol agents threatened, Chicago chaos spilling over, and a mayor in total meltdown as federal power takes the wheel. The media wants you to laugh this off as just one block of Portland, but today, whenever you happen to be watching the show, I'm going to show you how these stupid stunts backfired, how sanctuary cities collapse under their own lies, and how Trump just delivered the ultimate reality check. So guys, I want you to buckle up because what you're about to hear, this is going to make you laugh, it's going to make you furious, and it's going to make you wonder how far these activists are going to go before the crackdown ends it all. So now I want to go ahead and start with the moment that had the whole country shaking its head. Portland's so-called emergency naked bike ride. Yeah, you heard that right, guys. Activists thought the best way to resist Trump's National Guard was to strip down and pedal through the city as if making a spectacle was going to stop law enforcement. Or at least federal law enforcement. So folks, this wasn't just a goofy stunt. This was a dangerous attempt to distract from the chaos spiraling around ICE facilities and federal buildings. Now, think about the optics, okay? Parents trying to get their kids to school, workers stuck in traffic, families just trying to live their lives. And suddenly the streets are filled with these protesters that are treating the city like it's their personal circus. And the media, they ate it up. They wanted you to laugh, to shrug it off, to think that this was just some harmless performance art. But behind the jokes and behind the gimmicks, the city was burning with tension. So here's the reality, okay? So while the activists were busy clowning around on bicycles, Trump's guard was already preparing to move in. Tanks from local museums were mistaken for rolling military hardware, fueling panic on social media. Residents freaked out about martial law. Come on, guys, martial law, while ignoring the facts that lawless mobs were harassing ICE employees, threatening Border Patrol agents, and chasing workers and reporters out of public spaces. So what started as a protest quickly became a full-blown stage for attention. It's like this time, the curtain was about to fall. Hit the like button, subscribe, guys, because what these activists never counted on was that their antics wouldn't scare Trump or stop the federal law enforcement. Instead, it gave Trump exactly the justification that he needed to act. When the guard arrived, Portland's little theater show turned into a hard lesson in what actually happens when you mock authority during a crisis. So then enter President Donald J. Trump, the man Portland's leadership swore that they could defy. This is the same city official who said, "Oh, don't worry, it's only one block," suddenly found themselves staring down the very troops that they insisted were not necessary. So Trump didn't just send a message. He sent boots on the ground, hardware, and command structures into a city where local law enforcement had completely folded. So the guard didn't march in to occupy playgrounds or take over neighborhoods. They were deployed to protect federal property, to restore order, and remind Portland that sovereignty belongs to the United States, not to anarchist mobs. But here's where it gets rich. Portland's mayor and the police chief immediately threw temper tantrums. So they went from insisting that the problem was small to crying that Trump was overstepping. See, these are the same leaders who refused to stop attacks on ICE facilities, who looked the other way when journalists were beaten in broad daylight, and who let mobs run circles around their officers. Now, if we contrast that with President Trump's decisive action, no hesitation, no hiding behind talking points, no pretending the chaos didn't exist for years. Blue state leaders have promised safety but delivered lawlessness. So on October 4th, 2025, Trump called their bluff. Portland begged for leniency, Trump delivered strength, and suddenly the entire country saw what happens when a president prioritizes order over optics. Now, let me tell you, folks, this was only the beginning. Now, your Medicare plan doesn't just affect you. Oh no, it affects your entire family. When coverage fails, it's often kids and grandkids who end up stepping in. This is why I partner with Chapter. They help you secure Medicare coverage that protects you and the people who love you. Now, one viewer said, "Calling Chapter gave me peace of mind that my grandkids wouldn't have to bail me out. So let me ask, do you want your family to worry, or do you want to do what most people already are and protect them? Now, most people are calling the phone number right there on the bottom of your screen, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. That phone number is 909-563-8279. So here's where the phrase really comes to life. Stupid games, real consequences. Now, we've already seen this movie before. Activists show up outside ICE facilities with their chants and their props, convinced that taunting law enforcement is some kind of a noble stand. They mock, they scream, they shove cameras into officers' faces, and they think nothing is ever going to happen to them. But remember Katie Davisport, the journalist covering Portland? She got smacked across the face with a flagpole wielded like a weapon. A flag, folks, turned into a bat. And what did local police do? Practically nothing. I mean, the attacker melted back into the crowd like a character from a video game, while law enforcement tiptoed around making a real arrest. Katie walked away with a black eye, and Portland's leadership pretended this was just basic business as usual. This is a pattern if you haven't noticed, guys. Protesters escalate, law enforcement retreats, and the mob grows bolder and bolder. They think it's just a game, like Portland is their sandbox. But when the guard steps in, suddenly it's not cosplay anymore. Suddenly, there are real consequences for attacking federal officers or blocking ICE vehicles. Trump's guard isn't interested in playing tag with anarchists. They're there to restore control. And that's the moment that the protesters learn the hard way. Mocking authority doesn't make you untouchable. It makes you a target for the very consequences you thought you could avoid. So let's go ahead and pull the lens back, shall we? Portland isn't the only stage for this madness. This is a symbol of what's been happening in sanctuary cities across the country. When leadership refuses to uphold law and order, the results, they're always the same. Chaos for ordinary citizens, emboldened mobs in the streets, and law enforcement left with their hands tied. Now in Portland, we saw residents panicking as rumors of tanks spread online, when in reality, it was just a defunct World War II museum piece. But that fear tells you something. It's not about the tanks. It's about the vacuum of leadership. People no longer trust their own mayor or the police chief to keep them safe. And why should they? Portland's chief admits the chaos is only one block. As if that kind of makes it acceptable, right? Tell that to the woman that was left behind with a black eye, or the families who have to navigate around mobs blocking ICE facilities. And then of course there's Chicago. Activists surrounding ICE vehicles, blocking operations, forcing Border Patrol agents to call in backup. Chaos is spreading. And while Trump deploys agents to secure the situation, the left calls it overreach. But to the citizens trapped in the mess, federal intervention isn't tyranny, it is survival. This is the cost of sanctuary politics. The leaders brag about compassion, but the only people that they protect are the mobs in the streets. Everyone else gets left behind. So this is where the circus turned criminal. In Chicago, an ICE protester thought it was smart to threaten a Border Patrol agent. Not heckle, not chant, threaten to kill. Now, think about how far you have to fall in order to look at an officer, man or woman, sworn to protect this nation, and decide the way you're going to make a difference is to threaten their life. Now, under the old DOJ, maybe that would have been brushed aside. Maybe the activists would have gotten a slap on the wrist or been called a peaceful protester by CNN. But this is Trump's America in 2025, and Trump's DOJ is done playing games. That protester isn't going home to tweet about this resistance. He's facing federal charges, real prison time, and a future defined not by hashtags, but by consequences. So folks, this is a turning point. When protests cross the line into crime, when chants turn into death threats, the federal government has every right and every responsibility to act. And under President Trump, they're acting. That one arrest in Chicago sends a message coast to coast. If you think threatening the men and women protecting our borders is a game, you just found out the hard way it isn't. So here's where things get even more revealing. While Trump sends in the guard, local leaders in Portland melt down. The mayor, the police chief, the same people who insisted it was just one block, are now screaming about overreach, about federal intrusion, about Trump supposedly turning Portland into a war zone. But let's go ahead and cut through the noise. The guard didn't show up to harass residents. They didn't storm neighborhoods to take over parks. They positioned themselves around federal facilities, around hotspots where mobs had been allowed to run unchecked for months. And so instead of cooperating, local leaders fought against them. And you might ask why. Why would any mayor resist additional help to protect citizens? Right? That's a great question. Like, why would a police chief downplay the chaos when residents are living in fear? The answer is simple. They're more worried about optics and ideology than about safety. To them, Trump's intervention makes them look weak. It exposes their failures and it proves that their sanctuary city model is crumbling. But to ordinary Americans watching at home, the difference couldn't be clearer. Trump is restoring order. Local leaders are clinging to chaos, and every time they lash out at the guard, they remind us who they're really protecting, and it isn't the people. So now I want to talk about the show of force that stunned everyone. This wasn't just a few extra patrol cars rolling through the streets. We're talking about helicopters circling overhead, inserting snipers onto rooftops to protect federal agents moving into hostile territory. We're talking about nearly 300 agents surrounding a building in Chicago, tied to criminal networks, clearing apartments where no rent was being paid, and taking control of a situation that local leaders had ignored for months. In Portland, DHS lasers marked agitators harassing journalists, a clear warning. Stop or force will be used. Now think about that. Federal agents willing to put snipers in position not to intimidate but to protect. Protect journalists like Nick Shirley who were being chased away by mobs. Protect ICE officers under siege. Protect the federal facilities that Portland's mayor refused to defend. And how did citizens react? With relief. People cheered as order was restored, as chaos began to shrink back, but the media, they either ignored it or they spun it as martial law. That tells you everything you need to know. Ordinary people want safety. The left-wing press, they wanted panic. Trump delivered the first, and they tried to sell you the second. But the images of helicopters and snipers spoke louder than any press release. Now, of course, the chaos doesn't just happen on the streets. It's fueled by lies. Over and over, we've seen the same playbook: invent a tear-jerking story, push it through the media, and weaponize emotion against facts. Remember NBC's fake story about ICE supposedly using a 5-year-old autistic girl as bait to catch her father? They had to retract it. Why? Because the father abandoned his daughter while fleeing law enforcement, and ICE actually rescued her. But of course that didn't matter. The emotional damage was already done. Or the tall tale about ICE raiding an elementary school graduation, leaving children sobbing and clinging to teachers, totally debunked. Didn't stop activists from sobbing into selfie cameras though. And we've seen it before. Hands up, don't shoot. The EMT sleeping in her bed, the innocent guy just trying to break up a fight. Each one pushed by the press, each one debunked by evidence. But by the time the facts came out, the narrative was already cemented. This is how sanctuary cities keep their grip. They don't win with truth, they win with tears. But in Trump's America, the facts are finally catching up with the fiction. And while the lies collapse, so does the left's excuse for letting chaos reign. So now let's go ahead and zero in on the mayor of Portland. This is the man at the very center of this entire disaster. So when Trump deployed the National Guard, this mayor didn't breathe a sigh of relief. No, he didn't thank federal agents for protecting his residents. He threw a tantrum, publicly blasting the Guard, insisting that the number of necessary troops was 0, and mocking the very people keeping his city from collapsing. This is the same mayor who downplayed violence as just one block. The same mayor who let mobs beat journalists and harass ICE employees. This is the same mayor who said federal presence was the problem while families in his city were terrified to leave their homes. So ask yourself, who's he really protecting? Because it sure isn't the single mom who's trying to get her kids to school without crossing a protest. It isn't the journalist getting smacked in the face with a flagpole, and it definitely isn't the citizens that are begging for safety. He's protecting the activists, the optics, the narrative. He's protecting himself. And here's the kicker. Every time he melts down in front of cameras, he proves Trump right. He proves the chaos isn't a fluke. It's the product of a weak leadership propped up by fake stories and failed ideology. The meltdown isn't just political theater. It is an admission of total failure. So this kind of brings us full circle. The naked bike rides, the chants, the mobs, every single activist thought that they were untouchable. This is why they threatened Border Patrol agents. This is why they swung flags like weapons. That is why they swarmed ICE facilities, convinced that there would be no consequences. But in October 2025, under President Trump, the rules have changed. That Chicago protester who threatened to kill an agent facing real federal charges. The agitator who harassed journalists and ICE officers being dragged into courtrooms instead of back onto Twitter. Katie Davis Court's black eye. Nick Shirley being chased down. Border Patrol being threatened. None of it has been forgotten. This is what zero tolerance looks like. Not empty slogans, not political spin, but real accountability. Protesters who thought that they were playing a game, they're now realizing that the game is over. And the consequences are real, federal and permanent. So here's a lesson, folks. Portland thought it could laugh off lawlessness. Chicago thought it could protect chaos. And sanctuary cities thought that they could just run forever on fake stories and sympathy plays. But the Guard moved in. ICE cracked down, and Trump delivered the one thing these cities haven't seen in years: consequences. Stupid games always end the same way. Real consequences. And this time, the entire city is watching. Now, if you're tired of the lies, if you're sick of seeing American cities sacrificed for optics and politics, then do not blink, because Trump's crackdown isn't just about Portland. It's about every city where chaos has been allowed to fester. And if Portland's naked bike ride finally backfired this badly, imagine what's coming next. Like, subscribe, and share, because this story is far from over.